I hope I'm not alone in admitting that while I love video games, I've had a very hard time in the past connecting with people in the community. The reason for this becomes quickly apparent once you've spent even just 10 minutes reading threads on gaming blogs and articles. Allow me to give you some samples of the kind of vitriol I'm talking about. So Cloud meets Sephiroth, who's also emo. He tries to listen to Blink-182 to calm down, but is still filled with teen angst towards mom and dad. To get back at them for being mean, Sephiroth arbitrarily burns down a village and summons Meteor. Ha! I knew it was god-awful. Oh well, back to playing the waiting game for a good game. Not like I haven't been waiting 15 years already. Another typical corporate dump. Wow, these reasons are truly pointless. Or maybe you're so stupid you can't find out how to fast travel, and you're just a little Nintendo fanboy who likes to rush through it and end up dead at the end. Please drop dead. The world would be better without you. Awakening sucks. It's attracted a whole new audience of noobs. Tries to be like Thracia, Sacred Stones, and Genealogy. Storyline is crap. Too many after-game challenges. Crap characters, crappy maps, crappy graphics, and this is always my favorite part here. And it ruined the original Fire Emblem. How could you get so crappy, Fire Emblem? Zelda sucks. Skyward Sword sucked. F every Nintendo. If you're a subscriber to my channel, it's likely because you're a fan of the Final Fantasy series. And if you're a fan of the Final Fantasy series, and have spent any amount of time discussing these games online, then you're no stranger to this kind of maliciousness. But why is it so prevalent though? I've asked myself that question many times over the years, but it wasn't until I got a little older and actually started paying attention to politics, science, and other important world issues that I realized this kind of vicious, closed-minded enmity towards anyone who disagrees literally exists everywhere. But why? Why do people feel compelled to attack those who disagree with them, to belittle them, to mock them? In the realm of politics, several sources have emerged in recent years that clearly only have the singular goal of creating content that mocks anyone who stands on the other side of the political spectrum. You'll also see this in any debate between religious people and anti-theists online. It's no longer about educating people or informing them of the facts. These platforms have now become a mechanism to feed their audience's confirmation bias. Confirmation bias, also called confirmatory bias or my-side bias, is the tendency to search for, interpret, favor, and recall information in a way that confirms one's beliefs and hypotheses while giving disproportionately less consideration to alternative possibilities. It's a type of cognitive bias and a systematic error of inductive reasoning. People display this bias when they gather or remember information selectively or when they interpret it in a biased way. The effect is stronger for emotionally charged issues and for deeply entrenched beliefs. I think that last sentence holds the key to answering the question we're considering. When people have a deeply entrenched belief, one that is emotionally charged, it seems that as a part of human nature, we seek to defend and vindicate those beliefs, and in many cases do so by attacking dissenting opinions as if they pose some kind of threat to our way of life. In the case of politics, this may sometimes be true, though it isn't true nearly as often as many right or left-wing extremists would have you believe. One way in which people seek to defend their confirmation bias, or to put it more accurately, rationalize their own set of beliefs, is to organize with as many other like-minded people as possible to protest in whatever form they deem appropriate, which can be as harmless as creating an online petition and asking for signatures, which never accomplishes anything, let's be honest, or posting a stupid meme that misrepresents the facts or attacks straw men. However, it can also take the form of violent protests in the streets of major cities, where real damage can be done. This behavior can be classified as in-group favoritism, which refers to a pattern of favoring members in one's in-group over out-group members. In-group favoritism is rampant on social media. This is due largely to companies like Google and Facebook, who actively track the websites you visit in order to collect data that illuminates the type of person you are. In other words, these companies are trying to understand the things that you like and dislike. They use this data to suggest like-minded content for you to consume. You've probably experienced this right here on YouTube on the front page, where channels and videos are suggested to you. These suggestions are made based on your watch history, and Facebook does the same thing with posts that appear in your feed. This is done with the goal of keeping you on their website consuming for as long as possible, because feeding a person's confirmation bias makes them feel vindicated, and when a person associates a sense of vindication with their time spent on a website, a pattern of frequent visitation can quickly be formed. This is why many people admit to having an addiction to checking Twitter or Facebook or whatever social media platform they visit regularly. The deeply concerning issue here, however, is that these practices are breeding a society and culture on the internet that heavily promotes and instills our confirmation bias and in-group favoritism. This is a terrible thing for two important reasons. It encourages, develops, and habitualizes a tribal mentality, which in turn prevents our societies from moving towards a global, peaceful, and united civilization. Okay, but how does any of this apply to video game criticism, you might ask? Well, now that we've established what confirmation bias and in-group favoritism are, we can now frame our discussion about video game criticism to make my extremely long-winded point. But before we do that, however, we need to understand one final term: false consensus bias. In psychology, the false consensus effect, or false consensus bias, is a cognitive bias whereby a person tends to overestimate the extent to which their opinions, beliefs, preferences, values, and habits are normal and typical of those of others. For example, that others also think the same way that they do. This cognitive bias tends to lead to a perception of consensus that does not exist, a false consensus. Let's examine a comment on IGN's review of The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword to further understand this principle. It's amazing how reviewers got this game completely wrong. Reviewers hailed this game as a masterpiece, but this game was reviled by Zelda fans. It is universally considered the worst Zelda game. This is a perfect example of false consensus bias. Do you see how the user here falsely assumed and completely overestimated how many Zelda fans lie on his side of the debate? Did you also notice how he claims the reviewers got it wrong? There are two elements to this comment that I think perfectly demonstrate everything we've been exploring so far regarding confirmation bias, in-group favoritism, and false consensus bias. First, he believes that an opinion of a video game can be wrong. This comes, in my opinion, from the habitualized tribal mentality, partly established by the nature of the internet and social media, that is so prevalent in our way of talking about important issues like politics, and carries over into discussions about subjective things like opinions about movies and games. Second, he thinks that because the social circles he frequents, whether online or off, tend to agree with his opinions about Skyward Sword, that the majority of Zelda fans also agree. This of course can be debunked in 2 seconds by looking at the user scores of the game on Metacritic, and while Metacritic has many of its own problems relating to user reviews, it is at least a moderately objective source when strictly considering the percentages in which users either enjoyed or did not enjoy a certain game. In Skyward Sword's case, it's pretty clear that the majority of users liked it, whereas a game like Fallout 4 was clearly more divisive, at least for PC users. We can also look at some examples here on my own channel to see these patterns of cognitive bias. Keep in mind, I'm not doing this to criticize or vilify my viewers, but to make a point about how commonly these biases manifest themselves even in people who aren't using a defamatory voice. Take this chain of comments for instance. In the first comment, one of my viewers gave a brief, oversimplified description of who Kefka is in order to more easily present his own position as reasonable. This is an example of a straw man fallacy, which is where you attempt to prove an argument by overstating, understating, exaggerating, oversimplifying, or completely fabricating the arguments of the opposing side. I attempted to point this out to the viewer in my comment, but was quickly followed by another viewer who essentially did the same thing in his description of Cloud Strife from Final Fantasy VII. He writes, "Do you even want to compare her," referring to Terra from Final Fantasy VI, "to Cloud? Cloud is literally an amnesiac that thinks he's someone else. Terra is someone that's neither human nor Esper, that was tortured and used her entire childhood and teenhood, and that is now being treated as basically a weapon by both the Empire and the Returners, while she still has no idea what emotions even are." Do you see how this viewer did exactly the same thing as the first viewer, but from the opposing viewpoint? He clearly understated and flagrantly oversimplified Cloud's characterization from Final Fantasy VII in order to make his argument appear more valid. Again, I'm not sharing these examples to put down my viewers in any way. Please don't misunderstand the purpose of this. I myself have argued in this way for years over on the IGN boards. Everyone does, at least to some extent, because it's within our very nature as human beings to defend and rationalize our confirmation bias. It wasn't until recently that I became aware of these psychological tendencies in people. The point is not to demonize those who use these fallacious tactics, but to educate people about a common human failing that we all share, and hopefully help my viewers and this community to overcome such tendencies. But hold on, you might be saying, that's hypocritical. Just last week you seemed very critical of Xenoblade Chronicles X and the AAA gaming industry at large in the video that you put up. Yes, that's true, but I did that for a very specific reason. You see, I wanted to get as many dissenting opinions about the game as I could, specifically because I had some problems with it, and I was looking for anyone who might be able to alter my perspective. The best way, in my experience, to get an impassioned response is to put up an impassioned, one-sided opinion that may get people riled up. In other words, I took advantage of my viewers' confirmation bias, but hopefully toward a noble end. In a few cases, this plan was very successful, and after explaining my reasons for using the voice I did, I had some wonderful conversations with people who helped me understand a lot more about the game that I didn't know before, and having that new perspective has changed how I'm going to approach reviewing the game next week. In some areas, I've found a new respect for Xenoblade Chronicles X, and I think it's extremely important to seek for that kind of perspective when constructing fair criticism. And that, as always, is my first priority here on the channel. Now, that doesn't mean that my criticism last week was fake, or that I was over-exaggerating how I felt. I really did genuinely mean the things I was saying, but I purposefully used a voice that I knew would get people to respond. Now, none of this means that you can't form your own opinions. Of course, it's healthy and encourageable to build your own set of ideas and express them freely. It also doesn't mean that subjective opinions don't belong in well-presented, fair criticism. What I'm saying is that I find it extremely important not to allow those unique opinions to devolve into deep-rooted, emotionally entrenched beliefs that drive us to defend and vindicate ourselves by obscuring and dismissing the facts. Doing so not only halts our own personal growth and learning, but also emboldens, implants, and further cements a divisive society that hides within in-group favoritism, rather than encouraging us to take the more difficult, uncomfortable path of challenging our own beliefs. So in closing, I want to extend a challenge to my viewers. The next time you come across a dissenting opinion online, no matter how idiotic, offensive, or mean-spirited it may seem to you, I implore you to approach the discussion with the assumption that you are wrong and the other person is right. When you approach a debate in this way, giving your opponent a large measure of respect and allowing them an opportunity to persuade you, you'll be surprised how often they'll reciprocate that action, and how both parties will come out of the discussion with a newfound respect and perspective of the issue. At least, that has always been the case in my experience. Until next week, thanks for watching, and I look forward to the discussion in the comments section.